Week 5 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. So CMC, it's always been a health thing. If he's healthy, we know he's one of the top running backs in all fantasy football in the NFL. So this week in a matchup with Los Angeles, a team very familiar with playing them 2 times a year in the same division. On Thursday night especially, I think McCaffrey once again goes out there and puts up his normal stats. Number 2, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs, another great season it's been for him entering his 3rd season. More of a workload he's getting in this backfield is Jahmyr Gibbs. And this week in a matchup at Cincinnati, where we just saw the Denver Broncos rush over 175 yards on the ground, I think Gibbs out there and do a lot of damage in this one. Number 3, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So James Cook, it's been another great season for him so far in the first month. Last year led the league in rushing touchdowns, and so far this year he's rushing for more yards and taking big plays in the passing game as well as Cook. And this week in a matchup Sunday night versus division rival the New England Patriots, Cook once again I think goes out there and has a top 3 performance. Number 4, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So this week a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. We know Jonathan Taylor's been a stud running back for the majority of his NFL career, and he's been a better back at home than he's been on the road. So with a bad Raider defense coming in and a home game for Indianapolis, I think Taylor's going to get a big workload in this one. Number 5, Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins is still, to me, one of the more underrated running backs in his 3rd season now is Devon Achane. Weekly, he finds ways to get points, 15 or more fantasy points in every game so far this season in PPR week. Monday night, he didn't catch the football really, but he showed what he could do on the ground versus the New York Jets, and he found the end zone. So this week in a good matchup at the Carolina Panthers, and now obviously with Tyreek Hill out for the season, I think that we're going to see Achane line up a little bit more as a receiver and get even possibly more receptions, believe it or not. Number 6, Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. So far for Saquon Barkley, it's been a solid year, but not the monster numbers like we saw last season. And obviously, I don't think he's going to go out there and rush for 2,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. But defenses are really locking in and trying to stop Saquon Barkley and force Jalen Hurts to beat him. So this week in a tougher matchup versus the Denver Broncos, where their defense is starting to get back to where it was last season a little bit, I think Saquon Barkley still has a good ball game. Number 7, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So as of now, he's banged up. He was heading for an MRI and more tests is Bucky Irving. Last week he had a big ball game versus the Philadelphia Eagles where Bucky did a little bit of everything. So Bucky Irving coming into the year, I thought he was a good solid back. Could catch the football out of the backfield running between the tackles. And this week a better matchup at the Seattle Seahawks. Number 8, Omarion Hampton of Los Angeles Chargers. So the first 2 weeks of the season, Hampton barely touched the ball, even though he was out there for 80+% of the snaps. And now the last 2 weeks, they're feeding Hampton the football, and he's looked great, Omarion Hampton. He had a good college career, 1st-round pick for a reason, and especially with Najee Harris out for the year as well, there's no competition at all to take any touches away from him in this backfield. And this week, it's a good matchup versus the Commanders. Number 9, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. So now with Lamar Jackson out, I think they're going to lean on Henry more. Is this Baltimore Raven team? Cooper Rush, he's been a solid backup for many seasons. Last year we saw him fill in a majority of the season for Dak Prescott, and the Cowboys had everything going offensively. Lamb was getting his numbers, Rico Dotto was running good, and I think this running game could get stronger with Derrick Henry. Obviously Rush is going to take some running attempts away from Henry. So this week in a matchup to get right versus the Houston Texans, Henry's had the fumbling issues and been bottled up the last few weeks. He bounces back in a big way. Number 10, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. And with Braylon Allen twisting that knee pretty badly on Monday night, I think Hall now could get into that goal line package once again, get those touches where obviously Braylon Allen was vulturing him the first few weeks of the season. And this week it's a slam dunk matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys where they can't stop anyone. And this most likely will be a high-scoring game in MetLife between these two teams. Number 11 staying in the same game, Javonte Williams of the Dallas Cowboys. Javante's been a big surprise. The thing with Javonte is he is only 25 years old. He did come off an ACL a few years ago, and now he finally feels 100%, and obviously it's showing behind this Cowboy offensive line, and he's going out there making plays, and he's top 5 in points per game at the position. So this week in a matchup with the Jets with Devon Achane did damage to them. I think Javonte Williams and the Cowboys offense will put up points in this one. Number 12, Ashton Jeanty of the Las Vegas Raiders. So the first 3 weeks of the season, people were getting worried that he didn't look like the real deal, that he was from a small college and all that stuff about Ashton Jeanty. But last week he went out there and he had a monster game versus the Chicago Bears. 3 total touchdowns, over 130 yards on the ground. And this week in Indianapolis on the fast track, I think Ginty, they're going to feed him in this one, is this Las Vegas Raider team. I know this Colt defense is pretty stout against the run, but Ginty, we saw the upside and we saw the potential last week, and I think they just got to get him in the right positions. Number 13, another rookie, Quinshon Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. He's quickly been moving up the rankings. Judkins barely had an off-season in training camp, had off-the-field issues, but we're seeing him go out there versus good defenses and put up numbers. And obviously Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford over the last few weeks haven't been a factor in this backfield. So this week in a matchup versus Minnesota that just got gashed by Kenneth Gainwell, the backup running back last week of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think Judkins could go out there and have a good game once again. 14, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Etienne's been a nice surprise this season. A lot of people wrote him off coming into fantasy drafts, especially where Tank Bigsby was there early in the season with this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But this week, they're most likely going to be chasing points. Obviously, a tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the better defenses in the league. But Etienne's volume's been there, and Bashal Tutin really hasn't taken work from him as well. 15, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. So Kenneth Walker, a lot of people are expecting the breakout, but it's pretty much a 50-50 split in the backfield over there, with Walker with more upside, catching the football out of the backfield, and home run ability, where Charbonnet short yardage and obviously goal line work. But this week in a matchup, potential high-scoring game with Tampa Bay coming to town, I think Kenneth Walker could go out there, have a good game. 16, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. So his ceiling is a little bit lower than it was to me coming into the year. Blake Corum's been getting work and some goal line work as well in this backfield for this Los Angeles Rams team. But the thing with Kyren Williams, he got a nice extension in training camp, 3 for 33. So this week versus San Francisco, division game Thursday night, points will be put on the board, and I think Williams will be a solid back-end RB1. 17, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So Chuba Hubbard, last couple weeks, the numbers are down, failed to reach double-digit fantasy points, and that has to do with game script, where they got blown out early and they put in a lot of the backups in the second half was Carolina. But this week with Miami coming in, their defense isn't good. Their defense is depleted as well in the secondary. And I think Chuba Hubbard bounces back. 18, Cam Scatterbo of the New York Giants. So Cam Scatterbo had a monster workload last week, 25 carries. He's a big kid. He's looking for contact, lowering the shoulder, running over defenders. And this week in a good matchup on the fast track in New Orleans, I think once again he'll get a big workload. And even when Tyrone Tracy comes back, in my opinion, I just think Scatterbo is more of a workhorse running back and a better back. 19, Alvin Kamara is staying in the same game of the New Orleans Saints. So Kamara, the numbers have dropped off over the last few weeks. Kendre Miller has definitely eaten into the work for Kamara the last 2 weeks as well, where he looked like the better running back in between the tackles was Miller last week, where he had over 6 yards per carry. But Alvin Kamara at home, he's been a better player than he's been on the road over there in New Orleans. And with a Giant defense that hasn't been good stopping the run, I think Kamara goes out there, has a solid game. 20, Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. So Benson, he looked okay last week. I expected a little bit more, I thought, where Benson got 80% of the touches and DeMarcado really wasn't a factor till the end of the ball game. But this week with a good matchup versus the Tennessee Titans, I think Benson goes out there and has a good performance. 21, Jordan Mason of the Minnesota Vikings. So this week he's lower on my rankings as Mason. Obviously it's a tougher matchup versus Cleveland. And the other thing as well, Xavier Scott, he was taking those third down reps and passing down reps, where Scott finished 6 for 43 and a touchdown. So Mason, we know he's not much of a receiver out of the backfield. This week, a tough matchup versus Cleveland, where they're one of the better run defenses in the league. But still, Mason, he's been a good running back the last 2 seasons. I still think is a solid RB2 throwing. It's 22, Woody Marks of the Houston Texans. So I think he overtook this backfield over Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, in my opinion, his knees are shot. Estes are behind him, unfortunately. But Chubb's still going to be in the lineup. He's still going to get short yardage and some drives to himself, I think, Chubb. But obviously, Woody Marks could do it all. He showed last week in between the tackles he could run, and coming into the year, he was already third down, passing down back. So this week in a matchup at Baltimore, where they've been bad versus the run, and they're most likely going to miss some key pieces on the defense here, I like Marks to have another good week. 23, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Brown, he's definitely fallen off over the last couple weeks, and this offense as a whole is totally fallen off. Brown's still the top back over there. There's no competition. Samaje Perine, Brooks, those guys aren't getting carries. Brown has the upside. I know it's a tough matchup where they could be trailing early and often this week versus the Lions, but I think Brown could go out there and put in a decent game. 24, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. So David Montgomery last week, he was bottled up 1.20 fantasy points in PPR leagues after he came off a monster game in week 3 of Baltimore where he went over 150 yards on the ground and found the end zone. But this week, I think he could bounce back. He's an RB2 for me this week. Good matchup with Cincinnati. Well, like I said early in the video, they gave up over 175 yards on the ground to the Denver Broncos. 25, speaking of the Broncos, J.K. Dobbins of the Denver Broncos. So this week, not a great matchup at Philadelphia, even though we saw Bucky Irvin go out there and have a good game. But this could be a committee right now, looks like, over there in Denver. R.J. Harvey had a lot of work last week. He looked good, especially in the passing game, was R.J. Harvey. But J.K. Dobbins, he's that physical in between the tackle running back. Cracked over 100 yards. It only took him 16 carries last week for Cincinnati. And this week at Philadelphia, he's still going to get his 15, 18 touches a game. And tonight, he's going to be productive as Dobbins. 26, Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. So possibly Tyjae Spears might return in this game. But Pollard, he's the running back that's going to run in between the tackles. And he hasn't really caught the football out of the backfield anyway. That's where Spears will come in. But Pollard, the workload's been good for him the first month of the season. This week, pretty decent matchup at the Arizona Cardinals. Well, I don't think their run defense is all that great. But the thing is, his ceiling's capped where this offense just has trouble scoring. And it's a pretty bad offensive line. 27, Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. So this week, a pretty good matchup versus Tampa Bay. Charbonnet found the end zone last week. But the thing with him, his ceiling isn't that great. And he's a touchdown-dependent running back as well, Charbonnet. Don't catch the football out of the backfield. He's not getting 20, 25 touches where it's a 50-50 split between him and Kenneth Walker, where Walker getting the passing down. So this week versus Tampa Bay, he'll get some plays, Charbonnet, but like I said, you're banking on him to get a touchdown. 28, Trevion Henderson of the New England Patriots. So right now, it's not a great three-man committee in the backfield over there in New England, where I thought coming into the year, Henderson, by this time, he'll be the leader in the backfield, but pretty much a 50-50 split between Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, and Antonio Gibson. So not ideal for fantasy football. Tough matchup at Buffalo, but if it's one guy that could break out in that backfield, it's Trevion Henderson. 29, Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Pacheco and Hunt, 29 and 30 here. This backfield, not a good committee as well. Isaiah Pacheco, since that leg injury last season, he hasn't looked the same. Last week, a touchdown obviously saved his day, even though still he didn't put up a good game. And Kareem Hunt, he's in the latter part of his career where I think his better days are behind him. He's a good change pacer back and a backup back. But Kareem Hunt, I don't think really should be getting 13, 15 touches per game. And I think you should watch out in the next few weeks. A guy mentioned in other videos, Brashard Smith, possibly taking more work in this backfield. 31, R.J. Harvey of the Denver Broncos. So maybe I'm lower on Harvey than consensus. But the thing with Harvey, he didn't play much the first 3 weeks of the season. And then last week, he went out there versus Cincinnati, and he had his way catching the football out of the backfield. Had a touchdown and 55 yards on the ground. But this week in a tough matchup at Philadelphia, where we know J.K. Dobbins is more of a grinded out running back and in between tackles. His ceiling isn't that great, and also we don't know if he's going to have the same role like he did in last week's game. 32, Nick Chubb of the Houston Texans. So Chubb taking a back seat now, it looks like, to Woody Marks, and rightfully so. Woody Marks, the better three-down back. Obviously, his pass protection's got to get a little bit better, but he's a rookie. And Nick Chubb, we've seen from him, he's been a touchdown-dependent back in the burst. And obviously, the cut and juke moves haven't been there for Nick Chubb like we've seen in the past, coming off a devastating knee injury last season. So this week in a matchup, even though it's good on paper at Baltimore, I think Woody Marks will be the back there for now until possibly Mixon returns. 33, Jacory Krosky-Merritt of the Washington Commanders. Krosky-Merritt, a lot of preseason hype, obviously. They traded Brian Robinson to the 49ers as well. But Krosky-Merritt, if he's not scoring a touchdown as well, he's a touchdown-dependent running back as Krosky-Merritt. So this week in a matchup at the Chargers, where their run defense is still a pretty solid unit, I just don't see Merritt do much this week. 34, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson a couple weeks ago, 2 bad fumbles in that ball game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers it was for him. And now this week at the Buffalo Bills, Sunday night, 3-man committee with Henderson and Gibson over there. I just don't like Stevenson, and his upside really isn't all that great, where he's not an explosive back, where he's got home run ability, or even a great receiving back out of the backfield as well. 35, Chris Rodriguez of the Washington Commanders. So Rodriguez and Krosky-Merritt, the two leaders in this backfield. McNichols, He's only getting 3-4 touches per game. And this week in a tough matchup at the Chargers, and Rodriguez hasn't shown much in the passing game as well, where it's pretty much just running the football and hoping to get yards. And now with Jaden Daniels returning, he's just another back-end running back in the 36 and final back-end rankings. Justice Hill of the Baltimore Ravens. So Justice Hill had a breakout game last week. We know he's the third down back. And now with Cooper Rush in their quarterback, I think they're going to design some safe plays early in the game where we could see some screens or quick outs from Justice Hill on those third downs, or even some early down backs if they like what they see from him. So like I said, Hill last week, he had 28 fantasy points. I know he was in garbage time, and he had a 71-yard run for a touchdown in that one. But as the weeks are going on, he's getting more into this offense. And like I said, with Cooper Rush in there, they might try to utilize him more as a receiver as well. So that's a top 36 running backs I'm ranking for week 5 of the fantasy football season.